I'm Mike Berry.
I'm Renee Langevin.
And I'm Sean. And this is explAInED. All right, welcome to explAInED. Today's guest is Al Kingsley, a respected voice in educational leadership, governance, and technology. Al is an edtech advisor, mentor, and speaker with multiple publications and recognitions, including member of the Order of the British Empire by His Majesty, the King, for services to education. We're going to ask about that. I want to know the perks of that one. He's a leader of Net Support Limited, bringing decades of experience at the intersection of education and innovation. He's also the author of several influential works on school improvement and governance, and the curator of a widely read Al's EDU Recommends newsletter. With a deep commitment to ethical, learner-centered approaches, Al provides thoughtful guidance on how schools can navigate emerging technologies with purpose and integrity. So welcome, Al.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Just distill it down. Edu Magpie. That's all out.
So, Al, we usually start with the same question where we ask people to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their journey, but also to answer the question, what does AI mean to you?
Well, I'm not going to repeat all the bits you covered. I introduce myself typically as a man of two hats. So on one half, I've got 30 plus years in educational technology development as an edtech CEO. And in the other 30 years, I've got chairs of multi-academy trusts, clusters of schools in the UK, working with the Department for Education. I chair our Regional Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Board, as well as looking more broadly at how technology can level the playing field when it comes to access to learning. So my passion is what's happening in education change, reform, development, and how technology can be a lever. And sometimes when I spend lots of time working in education around the world, I see a common theme and I go back to the office and say, you know what, we could create a product that might help mitigate that. And that's kind of how the ecosystem flows.
Nice. And where does AI fit into that?
Well, it's a really good question. Firstly, in terms of products that sit within portfolio of things I develop, nowhere. People often ask the question, that thing about what does AI mean to you? And I suppose whilst I am passionate, if you read my weekly newsletter, all about topics, the simple answer is it's just a tool. The more expansive answer is, like any tool, it can have purposeful and positive impact if used appropriately in the right conditions with the right considerations and the right skills. And where used without intent and without measures of impact, it can have absolutely no benefit at all and be quite distracting and disadvantageous to the users of the tool. So that's my bit of committing to nothing and sitting on the fence and telling you I agree with both halves. But you know what? I think most of us, when it comes to AI and other tools, frankly, would have the same. I could roll back 10, 15 years ago in the UK when we had the whole debate about, well, if we introduce a calculator into the classroom, then maths learning will cease. We'll stop having any critical thinking or cognitive function. That didn't work. Now we're saying, well, how are we going to deal with bias? And I think, well, we'll probably go on to that. But I seem to remember a lot of us still use Google, and none of us seem to comment about the fact that the results we get actually aren't directly attributed to the quality of the output. But there's quite a few algorithms at play, and sponsorship and finance and other things. This isn't new. It's just new in a different way. It's about building on those same critical thinking skills, I would argue.
Do you think that your experience in edtech of seeing a problem, a common theme, seeing a problem, and then going back and creating solutions allows you to look at AI a little bit differently in kind of that same lens?
Well, I think historically, and my first book that I chose to write, which was Catalyst, was, if I don't write it, I'm going to forget it. I've reached that age. Was my secret edtech diary, which was basically what's happened in the last 30 years with educational technology. And more often than not, the failures with educational technology were either the human beings weren't really clear about how they were trying to use it, what the why was. We knew what to do and how to do it, but we weren't really clear what we were trying to achieve and the why behind it. And the second part was, it's technology companies coming up with tools and solutions and telling schools why they need them, as opposed to understanding what education and schools need and coming up with solutions that are co-produced. And I think co-production is the key to me. Because we have some tools that come from the corporate space. And I can use an example that, we can take a laptop that's in the retail space or the business space. And if we put a bumper around the side of it and we give it some chunky keys and we preload it with a couple of edu apps, suddenly it's an edu specific device. And we're all supposed to go, that's perfect for young learners, without really thinking about, from a pedagogical perspective, is that the right device and finger spacing and keyboard and all the rest of it. And the same applies with tools. When we first started out in a pandemic and Teams arrived, most educators thought it was just a copy of a Skype upgraded for a quick chat and messaging app. It was a corporate tool that was hastily purposed and put into the realms of, here's a solution to everything for schools. And then over time, we backfill educational apps to make it more credible as a solution. And it's a very handy solution, don't get me wrong. But I think we can often see the tools that were invented from the ground up with the purpose of curriculum design, pedagogy-led, edtech is often the term that's used, that are co-produced with educators versus the ones that are corporate tools that we're trying to squeeze and just polish the packaging to make it edu-friendly, But put a few kids on the front of the box, and that's definitely an edu app now, isn't it?
And do you feel like that's happening right now with the edtech companies and the AI push?
Listen, I try and choose to be challenging. I've reached the point where I can, I learn from lots of people. I'm very fortunate that I've had a career getting involved in all sorts of different schemes, and I've reached the point where I can afford to be a little bit grumpy and say it as I see it. And if people don't like that, I'll just blame it on me, So the answer to your question really, Sean, is absolutely. If we talk about the AI conversation, I can sit in the UK. I sit on a number of boards. I work with Department for Education, supporting schools across the east of England. When the conversation comes to AI at the highest level, you have government ministers, you have civil servants, and you have Amazon and Microsoft and Google in the room. In my view, that's let's get the fox to guard the chickens. In other countries, we say, I tell you what we'll do. We'll get the same people together. They'll agree to provide some money to provide training for all the staff, who will then go back to their schools and want to buy these services. So that's some money just moves from there back to there and some, whilst using it as a marketing campaign that our government is complicit in, because we look at it and say, so what are our other options? As if, and again, please take the caveat, I'm pro AI when used for the right purpose, with the right intent and with the right efficacy. But this one size fits all, or this, if you haven't got it, you're failing your educators. It's crazy. Every school, and we're obviously talking more from a UK context, every school within a cluster of schools will be at a different stage. They might look the same from the outside, but you'll have a different cohort of staff and their competence and confidence using technology. And you'll have a different cohort of students with their particular needs. And so within that sphere, the idea that one prescriptive technology will magically provide the right inclusive experience for all learners, frankly, is crazy. It's something that may have impact in certain areas. So on one hand, I kind of often talk when I'm talking about technology of, in the UK, our education systems, challenges like many places in the world, funding, how do we keep growing the system when the funding keeps getting squeezed? Much of the landscape is about consolidation. I guess in US context, imagine school districts coming together, emerging to be bigger districts where you get economies of scale. And I say technology is but one of the levers that allows you to unlock capacity, those economies of scale. If a schools or a cluster of schools wants to join another with the right frameworks, you can support student information systems, data, curriculum overview. It can have a positive impact. And so it can be a really useful lever. But at the same time, some of the best lessons are, and I hope will always be, completely technology free. And I often refer, as colleagues who are far wiser than me, is that sense that actually AI sometimes provides an opportunity for the teacher as the sage on the stage to become the guide on the side, to kind of move that sense of it's a tool. It's where I come back at the beginning. It's just another tool in the toolkit. There's no prizes for who uses it the most. And there's absolutely no prizes, like any tool, for saying you have to use it until the person in front of the class, the educator, has the confidence to use it purposefully. And if that's next week, next month, or next year, that's okay, as long as we put the right, we call it CPD. I have to remind myself from an American point of view, PD in place. So, going off on these different analogies that I always weave in, you don't take your American football team at the start of the season and do 4 hours of training out on the football field and then say, we'll meet just before again for another catch up just before the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's what we do in education. We say, ta-da, new tool. I know your day is full, supporting all of the social, emotional, mental health needs and curriculum design that you need for your learners. Here's a new tool we've thought of. There you go, run with it. Now find time in your own personal space to learn it, to question it, to challenge it, to find peers who you can bounce ideas from. And at the end of the year, don't forget, we'll be looking at you and saying, why the hell didn't you use this purposefully? And everybody goes, yeah, okay, that's the way it's always been. But that's what happens. And the crazy thing is, I can get off an aeroplane in most countries where I'm working for school systems, and I see the exact same educators just looking head in hand saying, it's always been that way. We're just going to roll with it. I may have gone off on a tangent. I apologize. But if you invite Brits across for a quick chat without a script, you know what's going to happen.
We love tangents.
Yeah. And I can see how, it's just, I don't know, in some ways, as an American educator, it's, I guess misery loves company sometimes. It's nice to hear that, like, it's not just American teachers that are in that boat. I wish nobody was experiencing that. And, I can't figure out why we designed the system to work this way, and why everyone is okay with it.
I remember many years ago working in the US system, right back from the days where you had local state lottery providing funding for kit, but school budgets not having the capacity to put any software on them. This whole idea that we work in silos rather than joined up thinking. Because thinking about the challenges when we look at the US education system, I've written a couple of articles in the US challenging NAEP. I have to say I had a very mixed reaction. Some people supported my perspectives and others were a little bit more, how dare I, as a foreigner, question and challenge NAEP. But around the world, we see these measures of a school system and where there's a common thing. I spent 2 years co-chairing a work stream with the OECD. OECD published the PISA rankings around the world, which is our political measure of which school systems are doing best around the world, based on 15-year-olds and a core set of STEM-based subjects. And the 2-year project I worked on with the OECD was about promoting an education system that encourages human flourishing, which was basically to say, how do we move beyond just those core curriculum STEM subjects and measure school systems that encourage and deliver children who have resilience, critical thinking skills, cognitive skills, imagination and creativity, communication skills, all those soft skills that are becoming more important. And also leave with a love of learning. One of the things I always liked, and point back to my paintings that you talked about at the very beginning. How do we get a sense of awe and wonder, appreciation of art, fine art, music, drama, other things? There's more to an education system. So we might have a child who is, according to the PISA rankings, did amazingly because they left with the highest outcomes on average in Singapore. But those children might walk out the door going, hell, never again am I going in a classroom. Learning has been such a grind for 15 years. And 5 rankings down, there could be children from another school saying, I just love reading. I've got a passion for learning. I'm naturally inquisitive. I'm resilient. And they score lower because the focus wasn't on the same things. And the reason why I kind of dovetail that in is because the conversation about AI, and the reason I share it, is not really about AI. AI is just a technology now that says computers, systems can do advanced mathematics better than the best human being, can analyze big quantities of data, can research more quickly than human beings. So by nature, what that does is it amplifies our most human traits, those soft skills, as being the differentiators, the things that will do us best in future life, the things that employers will work. So suddenly we flip the education system. It's not about curriculum and who can remember the most. Probably a few years from now, we'll have an earpiece and a pair of glasses that tells us everything we ever need to know about historical facts, directions, and information. But our sense of our communication skills, our critical thinking, the things we can imagine, the innovation we can bring to the workplace are the things that employers will value most. So AI is a catalyst, ironically, in my view, to highlight the quality, the value, and the importance of human skills, our most creative ones. And if we all embrace that, then for the first time ever, we say this education system that's been around for the last 150, 200 years, depending on where you are in the world, is going to have to change, because our mindset that the most academic child, the smartest child, is going to be the most successful in life has just got broken. because it's not the most academic child that will be successful. It will be the most adaptive, resilient, capable child with that broad range of soft skills. So universities are going to have to stop thinking that they are the only ones at the colleges that offer the most successful pathway. And to end my rant on that one, something I've just thrown into the mix, a Chinese proverb. Who doesn't love a Chinese proverb? And occasionally they make sense to me. A stumbling bird can reach the forest first. And that proverb has been around a long time. In essence, in the West, we assume the smartest child will be the most successful in life. In the East, our assumption is you can be a stumbling bird, but if you work harder, if you put the extra effort in, you too can be the first to the forest. And it's not a surprise that, generalizing for effect, culturally, we will often see Asian children and families being involved in lots of extra tutoring and work. It's not about who's academically the strongest on day one. It's about how much effort we put into that education cycle. So it just changes the mindset. And I love it because people go, let's talk about AI. And I go, yeah, because the more we talk about AI, the more we'll highlight that the things that most teachers are genuinely motivated and proud about, which is about the broader, rounder child who's happy in themselves, is resilient and imaginative and creative, all those things. It just moved the dial to be they're the ones that are going to be most successful.
Wow. Al, I wanted to ask you about your most recent book, The Awkward Questions in Education.
Yes.
And did you notice as you were writing that any recurring themes around trust, power, technology that tie all the questions together?
There are some, and they sit top of the tree. There's a surprise in society, eh? Because the awkward questions sometimes are about, well, what is a good school? Which is and if I take a British perspective, and apologies for listeners who aren't so interested in the British perspective, we've had an education system that's been almost the same for 160 years, based on the British Empire. Wherever you are in the world, learn the basic numeracy and literacy skills, means at the end of it, we can drop you behind a desk somewhere and you'll be a productive human being in the empire. Because that's never changed and we move forward, we have this curriculum that's based around what the universities in the UK wanted to shape, which is we need to create a front door of who can come in and who can't. We've got to have a threshold. So we'll create what we refer to as our A-levels, ready to get you the qualifications to go into university, college. And they set a threshold that means you've got to remember loads of stuff for 2 years, and then we'll test you at the end. And if you remember enough, we'll let you in. And then we took it a layer before that for younger children. We said, remember it for 3 years. And then we'll test you on your recall at the end of 3 years. And if you're good, we'll give you some grades. And nobody questioned and said, hang on a second. After that, when we're in college or university, we get 3 years where we write essays, we have continual assessment, we do some small exams, but our grade is based on the sum of all those things. So we have an education system for everybody before they get to college, which is not accessible to 20 or 30% of young learners in terms of the way that we try to test that formative assessment that sits in the process. And then even worse, in some countries, like in the UK, everybody takes an exam in the summer, and we actually have a system that means 40% are guaranteed to fail based on the fact that we take a sliding pass rate at the point when all the exams have been taken. Imagine teaching your children to swim, and you had a system that said at least 40% wouldn't reach the other side, and that was your measure of success in your school pool. You'd all say, how crazy is that? Yet in our system, only 60% children can get across the finish line in the qualification in a given year. So if we have a system that's always been about remembering and recall and how you do things, and when you get to the finish line, this system that's been created, it kind of rolls back all about that curriculum design is wrong. We've got to change the way that we measure understanding. We've got to reflect on the fact that the landscape's changing in the world in terms of what is an inclusive environment. So one chapter I focused around this, what is a good school? Is it that happy child that's got a love of learning and is resilient and robust? But then it goes on and thinks, well, actually, we've got to change the curriculum because the curriculum's not fit for purpose. In many countries, we have an attendance crisis post-pandemic, post-COVID. So why are young people not coming to school? Is it parental choice because many more we have hybrid working? Is it as simple as that? Is it actually an ever-growing and now much more visible pandemic in children's anxiety, social, emotional, mental health? Is it a recognition that the bricks and mortar square classroom setting does not lend itself to all children, particularly more of our children who have neurodiverse complications and other aspects? Or is it just a fact of the world is changing and we need to provide more choice for ways for children to access learning? In the same way as part of my research, for the first year, I think last year, there was over 100,000 American students finished and got their college degrees without ever setting foot in a building with virtual online colleges. Then there was a minor issue, teacher retention and recruitment. And you look at that and you think, why would that be a possible problem? Who wouldn't love to be a teacher right now? And the reason why these all weave in is because it sits up top. National government firstly says, we know there's a funding crisis, but we're only in government for 5 years. So anything we want to do, we want to change now and we want to get the benefit from within an electoral cycle. So we'll get elected in again. So ironically, around the world, countries that don't have democratic elections have a ruling family. Take examples of work I do in the UAE. They make a decision to do something and it's committed for the next 30 years and everyone's on board. There's no pause, delay. In the UK, it's very much a case of we cherry pick bits off the side rather than have a long-term strategy for education. We then have a government who conveniently blames most of the woes on society on when it's convenient on educators and schools. Either we're getting soft or we're not being too challenging with our learners, or the solution to everything is just stop them using technology and that will fix them with the other aspects. And so why would you expect to recruit able people into a profession where the government says, I don't value you, I don't respect you the same way as a generation ago they did? Why would you go into a role where we all recognize that the pedagogy side is almost trumped now by the social, emotional nurture of children and often that liaison with families in terms of care and support? Why would we be embraced to go and teach a curriculum we know isn't quite right or fit for purpose for all our learners when we want to have the flexibility as individuals to diversify what we teach so that we have accessibility and equality in our teaching and learning? And so maybe we come full circle and say in some cases digital can be a leveler. It can be a way of providing different ways into learning. Advent of AI triggers things like project-based learning, problem-based learning. We see lots more focus at younger children at UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and looking at how technology can access engagement. In some cases, we find learners the hybrid model, the sense of accessing learning from home online, but having opportunities to meet and place with peers and develop their interpersonal skills can be a way of mitigating those challenges. So when I got through all 9, including one chapter, perhaps quite UK specific, which is actually challenging leaders of schools who say, no, we don't want to join together, when actually they need to, but they're protecting their own professional development and their role and their senior leadership role. And sometimes, you have to challenge from both sides. There's equity in that, as well as teachers aren't paid enough. We don't respect them in terms of comparable professions and journeys. You pull it all together and say, if you want to fix this, you have to start with a cohesive strategy where government says we're not going to use you in a political way as a pawn to play the game with. The role of education in any country or society needs to be non-politicized and needs to have cross-party support. And we need to look at making plans that are 10, 15 years in cycle so that we can plan, we can make sure that curriculum has the right consultation and development, and the funding is clear throughout the cycle so we can recruit and retain the very best people in the profession. There's other things in the list, and believe me, I've reached out to lots of folks. So many of those are people with much wiser ideas and perspectives. But you know what? Sometimes the ideas are there. You just need to bring them together and make it in a way that says it's okay to challenge the norm. It's okay to say this isn't right. And I know it's not right because over there they did it differently. Estonia, for those listening, they've got a very much more adaptive curriculum, much more involves technology in the early age, much more flexible. And people go, well, if they can do it, why can't we? Well, they did it because they broke away from the former Soviet Union and had a curriculum that was in Russian and had to redesign from scratch. If you've got the catalyst of start again, you can be quite bold in your innovation. None of us in other countries really have the flexibility or the opportunity to do a start again because there's nobody brave enough to support it. I probably talked too long there to that original question. I apologize, but
no, not too long.
I think that there's a lot of commonality between the UK and the United States in everything you said. And if nothing, it's become even more challenging in the United States with our current government
Oh, yes. You've had all sorts of fun recently, haven't you?
Yes.
You have to be very polite.
It perfectly illustrates your point, though. Yeah, because our Department of Education is going away essentially.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, education is a tick in the box. Why would we care about the most vulnerable or the children that need the extra additional support in terms of the funding we do across? Why would nobody assume that if we want future economic success in the country, that we have to prime the pump by actually educating and delivering the skills of our future workforce? The short-termism of economic growth without investing more in education and skills is something, unfortunately, you see from leaders in politics that are not thinking about the longer-term implications of their role, but the short-term gains of their role. And you can see that consistently. I don't wish to be ageist because I fall on the grey half of that divider in the line. But if you're a politician leading a nation and you're thinking about the next 20 or 30 years where you might still be around to either reap the benefits or review the output, nobody would say our education system is something that shouldn't be one of the most priority items when it comes to funding, because it will stifle our economic growth in the future. Unless you take a perspective from perhaps other advisors to government that human beings are not the deciding factor in terms of work capital, that AI and technology will replace it. And that's the thing that I think can be misguiding, which is it doesn't matter. 20 years from now, people won't be doing the same jobs. Well, people might not be doing exactly the same jobs, but people will be doing jobs because throughout history, we've always seen that the people who are creative or innovative will make a difference are the ones that change society, move things forward. So I look from afar, not being fully briefed, with despair at seeing what's happening in America. Because I think the most important thing with education is about consistency, knowing what's next. We have our challenges in the UK. Our education department's not going away, but they wait till the last month of every year to tell us what our funding is for the next year. And when you're really close on your budget, it prevents you making hires of long-term staff with exceptional skills. It prevents you doing and creating to innovative decisions when it comes to technology. We all have, or many of us have the benefit in the pandemic of getting additional devices from the government so we could help mitigate the digital divide. Well, 4 or 5 years on, they're all due for renewal and there's no money. So the subconscious message is we've empowered everybody to use digital effectively in the classroom, but now they're due for repair. They're not that important. Why don't you go back to using non-digital? And again, how can we expect to build muscle memory, confidence, skills for our teachers, let alone those students, if we're not recognizing that actually there needs to be a consistent plan for funding of that? We have some exams just started in the UK that you can take digitally rather than pen and paper. But the real reason to not go any faster on that process is because we don't have the funding in the system to make sure at exam time, every child will have access to a device to take those exams. So our solution is give them a pencil and paper. That's not a strategy to be competitive, forward-thinking nation. There's no point posturing on the TV news in the evenings about how we're going to compete with China and Russia and the rest of the world. You want to compete with other nations, you start by having a more effective and better funded education system than that. And then you sit back and watch how your system will flourish in the next 10 or 20 years. That's sustainable growth within an economy and within the country.
So, Al, take us out on a final question here. What advice would you give educators like the three of us or educational leaders about we can see it in your stories and your writing that you value kind of pushing those tough questions, being able to talk about those tough questions. But what can people that are in the midst of the system, how can they show up in a way that encourages growth and hope for the entire system?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question in many regards, isn't it? I think the first thing is to remember that the education system will not be fixed by people in suits at the top of the train. The key levers that ultimately are required in education are the staff in the schools who understand the context of children. The fact that just because something has a technological value doesn't mean that it automatically has pedagogical value or has had, frankly, any value. So what I say is we're always stronger together than apart. The network's greater than the node. Embrace the fact that we're all on a journey. You're not alone. As Sean commented, we're all struggling in different nations with similar things. But actually, the more things like your good selves too, where we bring community, we share common skills, we share what works, what doesn't work, we share our passions and our pain. The more there is a unified voice, the more there is a movement that provides efficacy and evidence to change the way we do our national systems. I think the most important thing is to just those words, which is you are heard and you are appreciated. And let's be honest, I spend my life in schools. I have chair of a multi-academy trust. Every year we seem to, so far the last 6 years, we've built a school. The one thing that just is a consistent message, people no longer just look a teacher in the eye and say, thank you. The impact you've had on my child, my family, and the impact you had on our community for the next 20, 30 years. And if we could all just take a moment and say, actually, you are heard and you are appreciated. And anybody who's not spent their time in the classroom is not going to be able to fix it entirely. Sometimes I get the challenge about, you don't stand at the front of the class. You've been involved in education, wearing all sorts of different leadership roles in different areas. But I take the analogy of Formula One. Anybody listening is into F1. It's like Indy, but with look better cars, just to be divisive for everybody. But if you're designing next season's F1 or Indy car, you are not going to have a successful car if it's made just by the engineers or just by the drivers. So the sooner we figure out that the only way we move the system forward when it comes to technology is that co-production between educators leading the journey, but co-producing with technologists and digital leaders, then we will actually have something cohesive we move forward. And the same comes with the education system. We need the politics, we need the school system leaders, and we need the teachers to be there so that we actually have a co-produced solution. And it is kind of reassuring that it's just as rubbish over here as it is over there right now, but at least we can share in that rubbishness together.
Yes, let's share in that rubbishness together. Absolutely. Thank you, Al, for joining us today. Amazing conversation. Amazing.
Lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, we'd
Thank
love
you
to have
so
you
much.
back. I can guarantee
thank
that
you.
already.
I look forward to it, folks.
Through these conversations, it seems like maybe we need to extend our podcast to an hour.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we say that we need to have you back to talk more about
Part deux or part whatever, can't we?
Yes.
No, thank you very much. So good.
Hello, my pleasure. Good to see you all, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.